Coming up, MTV Movies meets Kingsley, Lashana and Ray to talk all things Bob Marley One Love.
And I was just there like, in the back like, this is great.
Everybody I met was Bob's best friend. Everybody. So it was like, they all had Bob's stories, and it was like, okay, who's telling the truth here? You know, like.
He's the tough gong, he's the skip. You know, they called him the general, and when he's in the studio, he's not messing around.
Tyler's already like best film of the decade.
I'm rolling for the rest of this year. Hello and welcome to MTV Movies with me, Tyler West, and the incredible Hannah Flint.
Wagwan.
Hey, come on, let's get it up. Good. I love that. In this special, we are, of course, talking all things the incredible Bob Marley One Love movie. But just gonna put the warning out there, spoilers alert, all right? We're talking about the film, we're deep diving into the film here, so if you haven't seen it, make sure you do.
Spoilers everywhere. First up, here's Tyler with the One Love cast.
What was your reaction when you first read the script?
I got some work to do because, you know, we got to make sure that Bob is the way he speaks is represented, and the way that he talked. Like, there was so much to do. I read the script and I went, I'm not going to read that for a while because there's a whole bunch of other stuff that needs to be discussed and spoken about. So yeah, when I read the script, I was like, right, there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do.
And what was that process of embodying Rita Marley?
I mean, it starts with, you know, the usual scouring the internet and watching all her interviews, and I read her book, and I took my time with the research. I just soaked in as much as I could at home. And then I was like, I gotta meet her, man. I've got to sit with her. Is she about? Like, could we get a meeting? And I did. I went around to hers on a couple of occasions, and I came with questions. I was determined to ask the questions and write down the answers. The book did not come out of my bag. I just went and sat. I just sat there. I sat on the floor, crossed my legs, and just soaked her in for hours. Half the time, I don't even know what we're talking about. We were just talking.
Did you cook up? Did you eat?
Who cooked? We absolutely ate.
Yeah, I was about to say.
We ate.
You can't not, right?
Yeah,
you can't not do this.
Yeah, no, we had, I think, fried fish, maybe there was bami, don't know. Yeah, I know, we already, we ate, definitely, and we laughed. We really laughed, and I think that's one thing I gained from her spirit, which in retrospect is the way that I should have approached it initially, and I'm glad that it went that way. Her spirit and her energy, that's the main thing that she leads with.
And what was that process for, like, embodying Bob Marley?
Well, I've just had to switch off because I'll go, I need 5 years, you know, I need 5 years for this. I need to go live in Jamaica. I need to go and, you know, to really, you know, you could spend 10 years studying Bob, you could spend whatever time. I was like, we have the time that we have, and we're all clear about what it is that we want to do. The family, the studio, myself, and authenticity was something we all agreed on from the beginning. Those first 6 weeks of being with the family and talking to Bob's friends, I was in Trenchtown with people who knew Bob when he was 13, 14 years old. So, you know, Neville Garrick was on set with us every day. I was with Tyrone before he passed, you know, like, rest in peace. I was with, you know, I met everyone, and everyone's telling me the same thing. Anything you need, call me.
Right, more to come from the cast shortly. Okay, so now One Love is the Bob Marley biopic directed by Ray Marcus Green and produced by several members of Bob's immediate family. You've got Rita, you've got Ziggy, and also executive produced by Brad Pitt. So the film goes some way to tell the story of his life, his rise to fame, and has a large focus on and around the creation of the Exodus album. Wicked album, by the way. I've been rinsing it ever since we watched it. What were your like initial thoughts in and around how the team did coming together for this one?
So one of the things I really appreciate about the film is that often with biopics, they do this thing where it's like from childhood to old age or whatever, like until they die. And I really like how this one focused on a specific period in his life. I think, you know, we have a certain concert, a peace concert, and then we get the Exodus album, and it ends with kind of like the One Love moment. And I think containing it to that position, that period, I think you kind of understand who he was, his writing process, and I think it did well to like do flashbacks to the past. So it wasn't the conventional, typical things we're seeing, and I think it was so much better for our understanding.
I feel like, yeah, with this biopic, it's like, with some of them, sometimes it's hard to go through somebody's life with a fine-tooth comb and like really go through every individual minute. But I feel like this captured exactly the right moments of
Yeah.
Bob Marley's life, the bits, the pivotal moments that encompass change around the world and also reach so many different people. And I went back to Jamaica last year, and there's people that you will pass. There was like the driver that dropped us from the airport to the hotel, and he was like, oh, yeah, no, Bob, yeah, I knew him, and he did this, and the other. And it's like everybody's got a story. And he was only 36 years old when he passed away. He must have lived like 2 lifetimes by the time he reached 36. So I learned a lot as well about Rastafarianism in this.
Yeah, Rita was already a Rastafari. She was part of that kind of culture, that community, and she brings him in. And I love that so much about his journey. It's not about him being this, you know, stoic lone wolf, like he's the, you know, like, oh God, I'm the poor artist, you know. It was about Circle, and it's about Rita actually supporting in so many different ways.
Anybody that goes to watch this movie, you're going to learn so much about a culture you thought you knew.
And it's also amazing when you mentioned that the family were involved, which means you have his entire back catalogue to work with.
Yeah.
Like every time, I mean, I was sat next to my mate, and it was, I had to like get him to stop, like tapping his feet and like singing. I was like, let me listen to the movie, but I get it. I like the energy, but like, there's so many needle drops, and you forget how long-lasting and timeless his music is. And even when they were doing The Exodus, I mean, I really love it when you kind of get into how an artist creates their art. And when we saw in London how he came up with the Exodus like album title, which is like based on this 1960 Paul Newman film, which I have my issues with, but I love the idea that it's suddenly like this classic film, and suddenly that's right, let's do a song, and then we see that happening.
Obviously, the family had such a big part in the creation process and a big influence as well. Would you say that was like pivotal to getting this right?
Absolutely imperative. I know that, you know, me and Kingsley as artists, we would have been able to get there. There's no way now, in retrospect, there's no way we would have been able to do this if we didn't have the very, you know, careful guidance of Ziggy and Cedella on set. I spoke with Sharon really early on. We had Neville Garrick on set, who's, you know, Bob's best friend, artistic, you know, art director.
Everyone knew him, innit?
Everyone knew him. Gosh, everyone knows and loves Bob, man. There's stories everywhere. When I got this role, I spoke to my aunt, and she was like, oh yeah, I remember when I was at one party and Bob came and we were all dancing, and I was like, stop. What? What are you talking about? I'm saying that I'm playing Bob Marley's wife, and you're like, I was at just a random
was at
party
a
with
dance,
Bob.
yeah.
Like, how, exactly. It's mad, but it's also like reminded me just how much this story is for everybody.
Yeah.
Like it has to be. Everyone has their own memory of Bob, whether it be a personal one like our families are expressed, or it be from afar. You know, I played it at my christening, my wedding, you know, functions, house parties. Everyone has their connection, but now they get to learn him in a different way. This is a proper education.
Their instruction really in Jamaica was, you know, Bob Nassaf. You know, he's the tough gong, he's the skip. You know, they called him the general. When he's in the studio, he's not messing around. So, I kind of knew that. You know, Bob's from the ghetto. So, he's also a kind, gentle, soft, wonderful human being and humble, and he was a big motivator. You know, he wanted everyone around him to be the best version of themselves. That's what I kept hearing as well, that he was into self-betterment before that was a thing. You know, what you want, what you doing, believe in yourself, do your best, get up at the crack of dawn, get running, get healthy, get your stamina, get your fitness, you know.
He did it all.
He did it all. And so I got to learn about all that with the people who experienced that with him.
So was there any stories or facts that like stuck with you?
It was everybody that I met along the way who was Bob's best friend. Everybody I met was Bob's best friend. Everybody. So it was like they all had Bob's stories, and it was like, okay, who's telling the truth here? You know, like, so you're Bob's best friend, so how did, you know, it just was one of those things that Bob, if he met you, he made you feel like he was his best friend. You could see him being the best man at every wedding. That's just the kind of spirit that he had. But yeah, it was amazing to meet everybody, how protective they were. I mean, the entire country was protective of it. I mean, we had drivers on set like, yo, Ray, no disrespect. You know, like, but trying to help me. Like, you know, you might want to consider. So it was amazing where notes were coming from, you know, from grip trucks, and it was a communal film in that way, and I love that. I love that people were looking out for their spiritual leader in a lot of ways.
Right, it was wicked catching up with the cast there. More to come from them in just a little bit.
Okay, so Bob Marley, One Love. With a certain film like this, because Bob Marley has become such a massive figure, but he's been quite divorced from his like origins.
Yeah.
So I think we're seeing this. It must be so beautiful to see part of your like family heritage culture represented on screen.
Growing up with parents of of mixed heritage, it's a tough one because you struggle with the sense of identity or where you belong. And I think back to, like, so Bob Marley's music resonates with me because, like, there's a time in my life where I've heard Three Little Birds when I was very, very young and I didn't understand any of it or what was going on or why I looked different to everybody else. And then there's another time in my life where I've heard Three Little Birds and I'm starting to understand that process. And then I've heard Three Little Birds watching Bob Marley One Love last week. And then all of a sudden now I'm a complete, like that development process and growth to understand where I am now and how secure I feel within myself and how proud I am of my heritage and a mix. I feel like, you can't ever stop educating on it or putting that message out there.
Because there is something where it's about that mixed identity and feel caught between two different parts of yourself and you're not really allowed to be whole. I also thought it was really interesting just how he's kind of presented as this sort of prophet figure, like this religion who's been destined to kind of come and share his music.
I popped into like my local Caribbean jerk shop and the raise in profile of everybody now, like seeing this movie and then going out and appreciating it in the community and listening to the music and re-listening to the music and then also then going to experience Caribbean culture, it's really brought to life. And I've never seen a movie just sort of, like obviously, like, I don't know, if a movie comes out and then the sale in, you know, toys go up, like, that's great, that's one thing. But this is really empowering communities and just spreading that awareness of the culture. And I feel like I haven't seen a movie do this in such a long time.
We're barely into the new year and Tyler's already like best film of the decade.
I'm rolling for the rest of this year. Yeah, that's it. And now here's some more from the cast themselves. A lot of it's about like the creation of Exodus. One of the most iconic sounds ever. What's like one of your top tracks from that album right there?
Oh, Natural Mystic. I mean the whole album.
Yeah.
I've said one song and then the next one comes. I'm like, no, it's this one. The way he opens that album.
Would you say your relationship with it's better now?
Oh, I've never listened to an album more than I've listened to that album. You know, I studied that album. The movie, to me, when I first read it, going back to your first question, when I first read the movie, I was like, oh, this is about the creation of Exodus. What's interesting about that? What's interesting about the creation of Exodus is that they all nearly died 3 months before. So out of that trauma came this outpouring, this intensive Neville, Garrick, and a lot of the people who were there at the time, people, what's Bob like at that time? And they were like, it was intense. It was intense. He didn't really leave the house too much at that time. He was on job. He was writing, he was creating. And it wasn't always fun in the studio. They were he was really trying to express something in that album. And I feel like it was his whole life leading up to that point. But no coincidence that the trauma of that attempted assassination, the album, and they were up and touring so fast, just a few months. They had it together and they were off. So I think Bob's sense of being on a mission and needing to communicate something really, really strongly, that's what I started to feel when I listened to Exodus.
I mean, Exodus for sure. Just what that song meant, what it did, the name of the album, how it was conceived. So much so that we spent so much time talking about it in the film. I love, obviously, Redemption Song. It's my favorite song ever written by Bob Marley for me. You know, and War, you know, the incredible what we show in the film. But, you know, that's not on the Exodus album, but leading to it. So from the film, those were the top ones.
Yeah, I was there when Jammin' started playing. I was here the whole time. Whoever was behind me in the cinema, the worst seat in the house. I was just there like this the whole time. Felt like I had my headphones in. It was great.
I'm just gonna say that the scene that we shot shooting the creation of the song Exodus was like one of the most free-flowing days on set that I've ever had.
Really?
You see how we're there, we're just like, yeah, you do a bit of that, and you, no, you go. And I was just there like, in the back like, this is great. That is the moment that is gonna, I think, get me the closest to how they may have felt in the studio or in the home studio creating music. It was the vibration, man. We know reggae's got a vibration anyway, but them in particular, they just had something different.
So obviously Kingsley Ben-Adir took on a massive undertaking with this. How much do you think he captured Bob's essence, but also I guess personality and who he was?
That's a big undertaking because it isn't just like a production company looking at you and putting pressure on you. It isn't just like the fans or anything like that. It's a whole way of life from Jamaican culture.
It's like every Jamaican in the world.
Of like literally every single person will say Bob Marley. Every Jamaican will know Bob Marley and appreciate the culture and everything that's happened since then.
One thing I would say, I think who he was, and that kind of deeper emotion came out the most when he was sharing scenes with Lashana Lynch.
Yeah.
I mean, what she was really, for me, this beating heart of the film. I think she was, you know, not just like the typical, like, she was obviously a strong person, but she was also very vulnerable. She was assertive, she was patient, but she did show those moments of like, you know, she was humiliated a lot of the time. She was kind of on her own, had to watch, you know, the fact that
The
she has
strength of her character.
She's
and
a
Lashana
backing
did that
singer,
well.
you know? Nothing
exactly.
symbolizes more about like having to be in the shadow of such an amazing genius icon than those scenes where she's watching. I mean, some of the non-verbal things where he puts his arm around her and she just a look, or like just shoves it off, or just thinking sometimes words don't even need to be said. Bob Marley, One Love, hit or miss?
Hit every single day. Like up there with one of my favorite films of all time. Genuinely. The goosebumps, the feelings, like I didn't know where I was gonna laugh, cry, or come away just like, I just came out with a massive smile on my face. So yeah, if that could happen every single movie I go watch, then great.
If you're looking for anything else that could be similar, I've got a few recommendations.
Yes.
If you want to hear them.
Hit me up.
Hit you up. So there was a really good kind of docu-series called Genius, and they did a few of them, but there was one with Cynthia Erivo playing Aretha Franklin.
Okay.
And what I liked about that is that you've got like, I guess it's like over 6 episodes, but you know, if you want something about one of the greatest singers of all time, but understand like a bit about her origins, her recording her albums and getting in that music room, because some of my favorite bits is where they were jamming and it kind of, how do you build iconic songs, album, like the musician at work, and also getting into the family stuff. So yeah, I think that's a really good one. I'd even suggest like, of course, Ray is a classic.
Ray's great.
If you haven't seen that one, that's amazing. But I'd say even Judas and the Black Messiah, just because it, again, focuses on a specific time for a very important figure, Fred Hampton. It's we're played by Daniel Kaluuya, Oscar-winning performance, and Lakeith Stanfield playing Bill O'Neill, the Judas in the equation. But I think that's a similar kind of biopic where it's not focused on the entire person's life, it's centered in this moment, and I think it's far more like provocative and gets to the core of the character a bit more and what they stood for. So
that's some top tier suggestions. I love this, you know. It's almost like when you follow a food page on Instagram and it comes up saying you may also like. You've just given me like what I'm gonna like and go watch. Yeah.
Every
Come
time.
on.
I got you.
10-10.
I got
Love
you.
that hand. Right, that is it from us at MTV Movies for this special. Please hit like and subscribe below, and we'll be back here very, very soon.